this is a film I really enjoyed for so many reasons. First of all, the story itself is very hooking, whilst a bit all over the place in the very beginning. Once you get into the film, it starts to become more understandable and it's really enjoyable. And I really admired the creative choice of making the story very non-linear, i.e. with flashbacks and present day, and the flashbacks were used brilliantly to tell us the story of who these characters are, a bit about their background and why they're on the bullet train. Another thing I really admired is their attention to detail. So, example, like a small particular thing in the background may become a huge aspect in this entire film. They did this with a particular water bottle, which I'm not going to talk about, but my example is of, in the very beginning we see this news story of a snake escaping a zoo, and it has a very poisonous effect, and they talk about it briefly. Then later in the film we see the effect of the snake's poison appear on a particular character on the train, so attention to detail is just amazing. So another thing I really enjoyed about this film is, even though they advertise Brad Pitt playing the character Ladybug, he's the main character in the film, I feel like the film was stolen by the characters Lemon and Tangerine, played brilliantly by Brian Tyree Henry and Aaron Taylor Johnson, who honestly brought some of the best laughs through recurring jokes and slapstick humour. But also they really kept the plot interesting. And that's not to say that other characters didn't do a good job, like Joey King, who played the Prince, did an exceptional job playing this quite dark character who uses sinister actions in order to lure a person onto a train and then get him to do her bidding, which, very interesting, quite dark. Now, I didn't realise this film was going to be a comedy. In realisation now, because it was directed by David Leitch, I should have somewhat knew that, but honestly this film had me in tears with some of the stupendous shit we see. Like, just dialogue was hilarious, visuals were brilliant, and just the violence itself had comedic elements. It's brilliant. And something I've really got to give a shout out to this film is, it's one of the very few films that the third act was just as funny as the first two, which, if you know much about comedy films, the third act is usually the weakest, comedy-wise, of the film. But yeah, no, they pulled off brilliantly. Now, when it comes to the violence, again, I knew it was David Leitch, so I knew there'd be some sort of violence. When the violence was also brilliant and used in all matter of ways, for thriller senses, for storytelling abilities, for darkness, and to create tension, but also comedy, like I said. But also it's just really nice to see violence back on our screens again, as for there was quite a long time where PG violence was quite a big thing, and we were slowly but surely seeing blood vanish off our screens, and so it's really nice to see it return in buckets. In this film we do see a few cameos in this, which were quite intriguing. The first one we see is Channing Tatum playing a very suspect train passenger, and whilst it's a very small scene, it's still very funny and very memorable to this day. Another one is Zazie Beetz, who, whilst it appears in the trailer and her character does have a huge role, she herself has very little screen time, but she does an amazing job with that. And last but not least is Deadpool himself, Ryan Reynolds, who really has a small cameo, but his character is a huge reason as to why Ladybug is on this mission. So in the film he is name dropped quite a few times, and his character has a huge role, but he himself appears very small. Although I've not read the book, I've not heard anyone or anything come out and critique the adaptation that this film is on that particular book. The only thing I've read is that it was originally supposed to be quite Die Hard-esque, and when they went into production, that's when it became the light-hearted comedy we've got now. And now I still think it's a great film, and I do think they got that action to a T. I will say and agree that the comedy, whilst Die Hard itself is also known for being quite comedic, this film takes that to a whole new level, but still in a great way. The only negative thing I can think of is actually very small, and it's more of a personal thing than anything else, is that they reuse a joke from another film, that being Deadpool 2. Now, the joke in question is, in this film, the train crashes and we see all the characters kind of going out of gravity, falling. It's very similar to when they broke Russell out in Deadpool 2 and the truck that he is in crashes and they're all falling. In this, we see Ladybug kind of crash in and land on a inflatable bodysuit. In Deadpool 2, we see Domino crash and land on an inflatable panda, and it just felt like the very same joke. And in a way, for me, it just irked me. It seemed a bit lazy of the director to use the same visual joke. But yeah, that is literally it. That's all I could critique. Overall, it's a film that I'm actually going to re-watch. I'm going to be completely honest, the majority of the films that I review, I'm not really going to re-watch them. Sometimes I will, but majority of the time it's not. This is actually one of the very few films that I will go and re-watch, as there's so much that I could have missed. Comedy-wise, violence-wise, or just little more hints to detail. It is such a really good watch, just an uber violent, hysterical film. And it's really sad to hear critics are just slamming it. I have no understanding as to why. But that's critics for you. Is it good? I'd say it's fucking great. I'd 100% recommend it. I would say it's a 9 out of 10 for me. Now, when it comes to recommendations, because it is directed by David Leitch, I'm obviously going to recommend John Wick, which he is an uncredited director on that film. He also directed Atomic Blonde, and he directed, of course, Deadpool 2. Now, the film also shares visuals and comedy styles and violent styles of The Kingsman. I think they're both great films. I think this film's more funny, but I still think The Kingsman's worth a watch. Because of the characters like Lemon and Tangerine, I recommend the films Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, and to an extent with the dialogue in the film and the storytelling, I also recommend The Gentleman. It's actually not that bad of a Guy Ritchie film. I'm surprised to be saying that myself. Another films I'd recommend, because of Brad Pitt, I would recommend Inglourious Basterds and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And while he is very serious in those films, he also brings a lot of comedic to those films. Not as big as this film, he still brings an enjoyable amount of comedy into those as well. With the fact that this film plays around with time, i.e. flashbacks and present day, I'd recommend Memento, definitely worth a watch. Also, I'd recommend Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, as with Pulp Fiction, obviously we see characters intertwining into their different stories, and this film is definitely in that same category as well. Those are my recommendations. This is my review. Hope you have a good day.